Hi everyone. In addition to the material from the first few chapters of the textbook, I thought that we could have a quick look through a Prezi that I put together that outlines the basic model of a scholarly or academic essay. So I'll link to this Prezi on Blackboard as well, but I thought maybe it would be useful if I just talked through it a little bit. So I've just called this the scholarly essay model, and as I've noted there, this is definitely an oversimplified and formulaic version of what a scholarly essay should look like. But that's not to say that this isn't a useful model as well, so let's have a quick look through it. Like most communications, you start off a scholarly essay with an introduction. The introduction is going to start fairly generally and then work towards a more specific thesis statement. We're going to spend a lot of time later in the semester talking about developing thesis statements, identifying strong thesis statements, and the different types of thesis statements that you can construct for your essays. But we'll sort of skip over that right now and just note that we end up at a thesis statement when we get to the end of our introduction. The first sentence of an essay is the most general sentence, but it's not so general as to be fairly useless to your reader. So don't start your essays with sentences that say things like "since the beginning of time." These are common first year mistakes to make. Avoid gross generalizations as well, like general comments about history or society or culture or those sorts of things. Now, two different general strategies for opening an essay. You can start with a logical first sentence, so discussing the text that's under consideration, or maybe identifying a key person who features heavily in your essay. So, for example, if we're writing about the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, a logical first sentence would just get right into that text. The figure of the albatross is central to Coleridge's poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This is a nice logical introduction because it identifies the author, identifies the text under consideration, and it starts to give your reader a sense of what you're going to actually be talking about. A slightly different way of getting into an essay is to provide what we might call a dramatic first sentence. So this is otherwise referred to often as a hook, right? Something to kind of grab your reader's attention and get them in. You might start with a question to the audience. You might start with some kind of striking statistic like this one. Nearly 96% of people involved in plane crashes survived the ordeal. Or you might start with a quote, a particularly striking quote or something like that, some general piece of information that people might be aware of or that might be surprising. The idea here is to get your reader interested right off the bat. For me, it doesn't really matter which opening sentence you choose. If you want to go with a logical first sentence, that's fine. If you want to go with a more dramatic first sentence, that's also fine. The logical first sentence is certainly a more accepted academic tradition. So if you're focusing really strongly on producing strictly academic work, maybe try to work within the logical first sentence. But a dramatic first sentence can also work well. So the main job of your introductory paragraph is to transition from that most general opening sentence to your most specific sentence, which is your thesis statement. Along the way, you might do things like identify the topic that you're exploring, the purpose of your work, the specific approach you're taking. You might briefly walk through the main points that you're going to be covering in the body paragraphs. You might provide an example to give your reader sort of a hint or a preview of what's coming along. And you might talk about the different types of support that you'll be using throughout your essay. From there, we move into the thesis statement. And the thesis statement is probably the most important sentence that you'll write in your essay, in your semester, in your entire life, dare I say. It's the central argument around which your essay is organized. There are two types of general thesis statements that we talk about in this class, a simple thesis statement and an expanded thesis statement. So a simple thesis statement simply makes the argument. An expanded thesis statement makes the argument, but it also supplies the main points, gives your reader a preview of what's coming next. The strength of the expanded thesis statement is that it really helps you set up your essay, and it really gives your reader a hint about what's to come. But it also helps you as a writer to keep yourself focused. So if you had three main body paragraphs, you'd mention a quick summary of, or even just some key words from those three main points. in your expanded thesis statement. You'd make sure you did this in the same order that they showed up in the body paragraphs. So it provides a little roadmap to the essay that follows for yourself and also for your reader. Again, for me, I'm not really concerned which type of thesis you come up with for your essays, your research essays, if it's a simple thesis or an expanded thesis. In most cases, I say that the expanded thesis is stronger, but in some cases, the simple thesis can be more effective. For example, if you have 3 really complex points that you're making in your body paragraph, you don't want to start trying to explain those in your thesis statement. Otherwise, you can end up with like, a 100-word long sentence. It just gets unwieldy and sort of overwhelms your reader. So based on your project, maybe think carefully about what would be best for you. I'd lean towards the expanded thesis if at all possible. So that's an introductory paragraph to your research essay, and then we move into the body paragraphs. Each paragraph in the body should be unified, that is, it should present only one idea. Each of the paragraphs should be roughly the same length. The paragraph should also be coherent. Not only coherent in the sense that your reader can understand what they're saying, but also coherent in the sense that the ideas cohere, that is, they stick together within that one body paragraph. Each paragraph needs to be explicitly related to the thesis statement. If you find yourself writing a body paragraph that isn't directly related back to supporting that argument that you've made, then you need to think about doing one of two things. Either getting rid of that paragraph or modifying your thesis statement to include that main point that you're making. Also make sure that the body paragraphs are arranged strategically or rhetorically, so we can use the organization of our main ideas to help make our point more effectively. So your body paragraphs will follow a pretty similar pattern. So the first body paragraph contains the first main idea. If you've written an expanded thesis statement, this will be the first thing you mention in your expanded thesis statement. And it'll follow this rough organizational pattern. Your first topic sentence, which will summarize the point made in that first body paragraph, and will also relate that main point explicitly back to the thesis statement. If you can even do this using the same keywords as you've mentioned in your thesis statement, this can really strengthen that topic sentence. If the thesis statement is the most important sentence in your essay, the topic sentences are the next most important sentences in your essay. And then your body paragraph should follow this general sort of pattern. You're going to make a supporting claim that backs up that topic sentence, of course, backing up your thesis statement, and then you're going to provide some evidence for that thing. And then you're going to do the same thing again, another supporting claim and more evidence, another supporting claim and more evidence. And you're going to continue this until you've made the point that you need to make and supported it effectively. We have different kinds of evidence that we can use throughout our research essays. A student once came up with this nice little mnemonic device. She blurted out listo, listo, and no one knew what she was talking about. But she'd put together this little mnemonic device to help remember the different types of evidence that show up not only in the scholarly material you're reading, but that you can also employ in your own work. So the first thing, the L, is the type of language that you choose to use. The language that you use helps make your point depending on your audience. Now you're writing for a scholarly audience, so you're going to use different language than you would be using in an email to a friend, or if you're writing a children's book, or if you're writing a newspaper article. So when we're doing analysis of text, we can be really focused on the types of language used, but we should also be careful about the types of language we're using in our own writing. Next, what kind of experts show up? Are you using expert opinions to support your claims or your arguments? Are you using anecdotes, short little personal stories? And what do those anecdotes do for your reader? Are you using statistics? You might use statistics to help support your claims. You might also think carefully about the tone of your thing, the tone of your essay. And this is connected closely to the language that you're using. You might also think about how your paragraphs are organized or how your points are organized. And last, you might want to think about what kind of examples you're providing. The end of your first body paragraph will finish with a transition of some kind to the next main point. These are probably the third most important sentences that you'll write, and sometimes they're in many ways the hardest sentences to write. How do you move from a really deep focus on one specific topic to then talking about the second specific topic? I find that if you're having a real struggle to come up with strong transitional sentences, you might want to think carefully about the general logic of your essay. Is it too much of a logical leap between body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2? Is that why you're having such trouble writing a transition sentence? And can you go back and maybe insert more material to help smooth the way across that logical leap? So the thesis statement, the most important sentence to your essay, topic sentences, probably the next most important sentences across your research essay, and then transitional sentences. If you've got those nailed down, you've got a pretty solid structure for your paper, and you'll just need to then fill it in with supporting claims and different types of evidence. So yeah, this is just a quick look at the more specific types of evidence that you might be building in. The second body paragraph does much the same thing. It summarizes the second main point, relates directly back to the thesis again, and follows that pattern of supporting claims, evidence, and then a transition to the next main point. So it looks much like that first body paragraph, but simply makes your second main point. And not surprisingly, the third body paragraph contains the third main idea, and again follows that same pattern, a topic sentence that summarizes the third main point, and relates explicitly back to the thesis statement, follows a supporting claim and evidence pattern using different types of evidence, and then transitions to the next main point. If you need to, you can add other body paragraphs. Given the length of essay you're writing for this class, the 3 to 4 body paragraphs is probably to be expected. Any more and they'll probably become a little bit too short. Fewer and they'll probably be too long. After your introduction and your body paragraphs, you're going to come to your conclusion. Two different main types of conclusion. The circular conclusion, which is probably the one most people are most familiar with. In the circular conclusion, we simply wrap up the argument that's being made. Right? We conclude it. You might summarize the realizations that you've come to throughout your research essay. You're going to restate your thesis, though in slightly different words, but again, you'll probably want to keep some of the key words that you've mentioned in your topic sentences and your thesis sentence to help string your reader along throughout that essay, and you're going to want to restate your main points, again using slightly different language. This isn't a place to be redundant, but it is a place to be strategically repetitive, right? To help your reader to make the connection. A second type of conclusion is what we call the spiral conclusion. Spiral conclusion does everything a circular conclusion does. It wraps up, it concludes, it summarizes, it restates the thesis and the main points. But it also does something a little bit different, and that's that it branches out from the main focus of the essay. You might introduce other ideas, you might talk about something extra or further readings or further areas of study. It's a place for you to talk about something related to the essay, something related to the argument, the thesis, but that didn't really fit in. It might be some kind of personal connection to the thing that you've been discussing, or some kind of application to society or history or culture more generally that didn't really fit within the body of your paper, but that you found is really important. Sometimes you have to be careful about including new information in a conclusion. Some instructors are dead set against it and expect only a circular conclusion. Again, for me, I don't mind which one you do. If you have something you want to mention that's beyond the scope of what you've been talking about throughout the focus of your essay, then certainly include that in your spiral conclusion. I find it sometimes nice to sort of take a step back from that very narrow focus you've been working through in the research essay and talk about maybe the broader implications of the ideas that you've just presented. So there's a scholarly essay model. Again, yes, it's oversimplified. Yes, it's formulaic. But yes, I will be expecting that your research essays, at least in some way, follow along with that pattern. Of course, let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about any of this.